Welcome to the latest edition of College Basketball Coast to Coast. I'm Matt Zemek along with Ari Russell, and we have TJ Rives and Jason Powers joining us shortly. Thanks for joining us just after midnight on the East Coast. And it's one of the best college basketball days of the year every year. It's March Madness, but first round of the NCAA tournament, that's 16 games. Today we have like several times 16 games with all of the second rounders and all of the quarterfinals at all of the bigger conference tournaments coast to coast. That's why we call this college basketball coast to coast. But Ari, you've been at the Big East tournament at Madison Square Garden in New York. We're going to get to that Villanova UConn late game later in the show, but we start with the day session. So you got to see Rick Pitino and the Johnnies up close, and then you saw that bubble game with Xavier and Marquette going down to the wire. Your impressions on what you saw first from the Johnnies and then from Xavier.
Well, the Johnnies, I mean, if you look at the scores throughout the day, as far as like the top ranked teams, they had the most dominant performance, I think, of any of the top rated teams that are playing in their conference tournaments right now. Pretty much took a very early double digit lead, and I think one time within the early parts of the second half, it got to within 8 as the lowest. And that was the closest that Butler ever got. But it was an absolutely suffocating defensive performance once again by St. John's. That's what they do. They are just relentless on the glass, on the offensive glass, defensively on the perimeter, inside. They're just create a lot of turnovers. I mean, they're just extraordinarily disruptive. They really play with a high intensity. Their shooting is hot and cold. Obviously, cold more often than hot, but they can still hit the threes. Scott hit a couple of threes. RJ Lewis hit a couple of threes. But really, what they specialize in is really speeding up the game and taking the other team off their rhythm. And they did it to Butler early on. I mean, Butler was not going to have a chance to win this game today. St. John's got off to a little bit of a sluggish start, and I spoke to some of the players after the game. Some of the interviews are actually on YouTube, on our YouTube channel now, on College Basketball Coast to Coast. It is kind of a weird game to have a noon tip-off on a Thursday. That's not something that they're normally used to. Maybe games in November if they're playing in the preseason tournament of some sort. But this particular time of year is not a typical tip-off time. But it is something that is possible. Most likely not for them. They'll probably get a later game in the tournament, but it does happen in the NCAA tournament where you'd have like a Thursday noon tip-off or 1 p.m. tip-off. So they did kind of come off a little sluggish for the first 4 or 5 minutes, but once they kind of got warmed up and picked up, it was lights out for Butler. They just didn't have a chance. They suffocated them the whole day and just completely, outmanned them. And moving on to Friday night semifinal matchup against a very good, hungry, and veteran Marquette team.
So let's segue right into that Marquette Xavier game. Xavier controlled this for a good portion of the game. First off, when did you begin to sense the vibe changing? And when did you begin to sense that, Marquette could actually win this?
Well, yeah. So let's go back to the first half where it was just obviously a pretty quick double-digit lead towards the end of the middle part of the first half where Xavier started to extend the lead. And it was really, I mean, they were starting to chip away from it, and Xavier in the beginning of the second half extended the lead as well, kept it at double digits for a while. There was just a couple of stops that they made, between like the 16-minute mark and the fourth 12-minute timeout when they started to narrow that double-digit lead. It goes from 14 to 11, hit a three. They get a stop, they come back and get a two. Now it's 9 points. Xavier comes back, hits a three. Then Marquette comes back and hits another three. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of spurts from both sides in this game. It was a very well-played game offensively in particular. from both sides. Tremendous guard play from both teams, which Xavier is known for their guard play, obviously. And but just Marquette just kind of at the end, just I feel like had a little bit more gas than Xavier did, and just were able to create a lot more turnovers, and most importantly, did not have that many turnovers at all. In fact, I believe there was a stat, and I think Stevie Mitchell talked about it, or one of the reporters in the room, in the locker room afterwards, brought up that they had no steals in the game, none. Xavier had no steals, and Stevie Mitchell was like, "Wow, I didn't even know that." But that's a pretty impressive stat. 0 steals. That just shows you that Marquette took care of the ball and hit big shots down the stretch. Cam Jones, Stevie Mitchell, those guys. There's a lot of treads, that have been worn down on that team, but they're long in the tooth of a lot of experience, especially at Madison Square Garden. They've had a lot of wins. These particular people, these individuals on this team, they're a force to be reckoned with. I don't expect them to bow down to St. John's, provided they just lost to them by, the skin of their teeth. Was it a 1-point St. John's victory? I think Ejiofor had a tip in at the end of the buzzer, close to the buzzer at least, to win that game. To win the second, St. John's has won both, so it's very hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. But Marquette is, again, they have a lot of experience playing in Madison Square Garden, and a lot of wins that they've had in recent years. These Marquette players as individuals have had that. Cam Jones has been around forever. Stevie Mitchell's been around forever. Again, a lot of experience. This is going to be a very, very good competitive game. I expect it to go down to the wire, similar to what Xavier did. Now, going to Xavier, I personally think that they should be a tournament team, and that's not to say that they are, great. But just the bubble is pretty weak at this point, and I watched them today, and they look good. I mean, provided they came into this game with a 7-game win streak, and I won like 13 of 15 or something like that. So I think they played themselves in this tournament, especially with St. John's kind of elevating, up in the rankings, has helped overall with the conference. So I would think that. Xavier, with ACC probably only getting 3 teams, unless, North Carolina, even though now they're kind of in the bubble, inside the bubble, it looks like now all of a sudden, because it is a weak bubble. But I would put Xavier inside the bubble. I believe some of the prognosticators do have them, but they're right there, even though they lost. If they won today, I think they would have definitely, made it in a lock. But I think they deserve to. They're a really good ball club with a lot of experience in the backcourt. And today, they were impressive to me, even in the loss.
Quickie, just a quick one. Xavier versus North Carolina on the bubble. If North Carolina beats Duke, do you still have Xavier ahead of North Carolina on your seed list, or do you think Carolina just has to go ahead and win the whole ACC tournament at this point?
I think here's the thing. Unfortunately, they're Flagg. Duke should sit them for the rest of the ACC tournament. There's no reason or rationale. They've already locked in the 1 seed, possibly the number 1 overall seed. Doesn't matter if they're the 1 overall or not. They're going to be in the East anyway, right? So they're locked in there. So there's no reason to even try to win this tournament at all, or they still try to win it, but not with Cooper Flagg. So at this point, it's. I think that just because they still are the 1 seed doesn't matter. I don't think that they're going to look at it with Flagg. They might, but we've seen that in the past where they've kind of overlooked the actual injury and just look at the actual win. And trust me, they want to get North Carolina in here. So I would think that a win over Duke, if it's between North Carolina and Xavier on the bubble, I'm pretty certain that North Carolina is going to get the nod over Xavier, for a multitude of reasons that you and I can speak about above board, and many other reasons why that most people don't want to admit below board.
All right, we're going to have TJ Rives and Jason Powers joining us in just a bit. We still have Ari Russell, and he's going to rejoin us later in the show for more on Villanova UConn, which is still going on. But Ari, while we still have you for this opening segment, another main question to touch on in the Big East semifinals, since you're at MSG covering the tournament, right. Marquette depth has been an issue at times, and so playing St. John's in the semis. Now, of course, Marquette was in the day session, so the semis are a night session. But it's just the second game of the tournament. It's not the third game of the tournament. So, the depth might not set in perhaps as much as Marquette. In other words, Marquette might benefit from playing Friday as opposed to Saturday against St. John's. That if this was Saturday and it's the third game in 3 days, that might be a tougher ask for Marquette. So it might be better that Marquette's getting St. John's on the second day of this tournament. How do you size up the depth concerns for Marquette going up against St. John's relentless pressure?
Well, Marquette's bench played a lot better today, gave some real quality minutes, but I think the depth is certainly an issue for Marquette. It's a completely different opponent. Xavier. The Marquette and Xavier were very similar in the sense of playing up tempo, could score a lot of points. Quick guards, guys that can hit the three, but you're not going to get those as many open looks, no matter how well you rotate the ball around St. John's. They're just so physical. And today St. John's was physical, and they were calling the game, the refs, like it was an ACC game. No offense to the ACC refs, but offense should be, because it was pretty softly called, the whistle, especially in the first half. So if it is a softer whistle, Marquette, it's to Marquette's advantage, because St. John's really likes to put the pressure on the ball full court. He runs a lot of full court pressure, and then he lays off of it, but then he gets into three-quarter press. I mean, they really put pressure on you. It's very difficult to get open shots on anywhere in the court, but especially around the perimeter. And that's something that Marquette relies on is the perimeter game, because they're so good with guards, with everyone. And their big guys can get out and stretch the floor as well. So, so that's something that their depth is going to have to take, because they're going to have to play a lot of physical defense. And then also on offense, they're going to be chased, 90 feet often. So that's something I'd be concerned about with St. John's, not particularly known for their depth today. They actually got a lot of playing time for their bench because they had such a kind of strong, comfortable lead, and the bench played very well, hitting some shots. And, of course, Davon Smith was a questionable player, but because he hadn't been practicing or whatever, and Patino famously says, well, I don't know if he's going to be available, et cetera. And almost 100% of the time this season, he said that they're playing. Well, Davon Smith came off the bench. He was in there for like a whole 6 seconds because he picked up 2 fouls quick in the first half. He goes to the bench, but he plays, about 12 minutes total, all in the second half pretty much. So he's a guy that is normally a starter for them, but he's been hurt. So now he's off the bench. That actually helps them for St. John's as far as depth is concerned. So, what I saw today from the bench play from St. John's, it seems like it was good for them to get some guys some minutes today. So their rest of the guys can rest, because I expect Marquette to try to really keep the tempo up, because you don't want to get in a rock fight with St. John's, because you're not going to win, because they come with some boulders. And, so that's something that it's going to be interesting. And Marquette's going to try to keep that tempo and keep the speed up, because they do have the guys that can do that. So it's just a matter about getting those shots off and not getting too winded, because St. John's is really going to punch you in the chest all game. All
right, Ari, we will check back with you in about 15 minutes, get the full wrap up of Villanova and UConn. So we'll see you in a little bit. Now we turn to TJ Rives and Jason Powers, and they are calling the MAAC. Not the MAC, the MAAC. You got to differentiate in Atlantic City. And so they are doing their homework, but they're joining us here for a lot of bubble talk here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. TJ and Jason, welcome to the party on this very busy night. Your top line observations on what you've been seeing from coast to coast on this College Basketball Thursday.
First things first, TJ was very excited about the music selection at the Applebee's that we were watching the Arizona-Kansas game.
It has,
first and foremost.
It has been a day. We have traveled from West Central Florida up here to Atlantic City. Temperature differential, you would say, is about 40 degrees.
By Philadelphia.
Like 80 minus 40 is 40. So we flew to Philadelphia. We've driven to Atlantic City. Metro Atlantic Conference title game coming on Saturday night on the College Basketball Coast to Coast tune-in channel.
Upset already tonight.
Yeah, we've already
the 6th seed in that conference. Mount St. Mary's beats Marist.
Yep. So we had an upset in the conference tonight. So we'll work the title game. Semifinals are tomorrow night. And what a blur today has been. So I know you and I and Matt want to talk about. I mean, whether you talk about the Texas
on the plane, we're watching on the plane.
The double overtime Texas A&M game was like a 3-act play that basically, Matt, would you not agree? This has basically saved Rodney Terry's job the last 24 hours. I know you were sticking a fork in him after the loss to Oklahoma, but the win over Vanderbilt and now a win over A&M has probably put him in the NCAA tournament, and I don't see Texas firing him right now, Matt. What do you think?
I think Texas is actually still going to fire him. I think being this close, and like Texas is going to have 15 losses provided that it doesn't win the SEC tournament. That's still not going to look great. If Texas goes to Dayton, squeaking in, I don't see that as having too much leverage, too much of a difference in terms of his ultimate fate. But anyway,
Jason, that was fired.
It's close. I think if Texas could land a big fish, they will fire him. I don't know if they can. A lot of speculation about Will Wade. Do they potentially go after a big fish? I think if they could get a big fish, they would probably eat the money if they could get somebody.
I think Chris Del Conte has a few nickels and dimes rolling around in his pocket to be able to entice someone. Anyway, Jason, your observations on what you've seen today.
Going to be very interesting in the Big Ten. My Indiana Hoosiers, not a good performance today in the first game against Oregon. Obviously, with them losing, Texas winning, how does that affect that last 1 or 2 spots? I mean, are they going to somehow squeak in? I still think, TJ and I were talking about they've won enough games, I think, in the Big Ten. They've got enough quad 1 wins. In the last month, they've played pretty decent. I think they're probably still in, but they're definitely a candidate for Dayton. Obviously the name on the front of the jersey is going to help. Indiana in Dayton would be a Midwest draw. Mike Woodson storyline. I think they're squeaking in the back door, but you never know.
I would say high odds, Jason, of an Indiana-Texas first 4 game in beautiful Dayton, Ohio.
Yeah.
Indiana versus Texas or Oklahoma.
Would like that.
One of the two.
All right, so big picture things. Obviously, the Cooper Flagg injury, and forgive me, I didn't see the very beginning on whether you mentioned that. So John Shire saying after the game that it doesn't look likely that he would play. Are you kidding me? He's not playing.
Zero chance.
He's not playing against North Carolina Friday afternoon. He's not playing in a championship game if they get there. Matt, I don't think he plays in the 1 versus 16 game. I'm just speculating that they would hold him out of that game. And maybe he doesn't play for 9 more days until the Saturday or Sunday second round game. Stay tuned. It looked like a nasty injury. I know he came back on the bench to kind of help his teammates, but I mean, what are the takes here about what does this do with North Carolina in the matchup, but no Cooper Flagg? What do you think, Jason?
It's the perfect scenario for Carolina. I mean, we've figured out a way to get them in the tournament. This is the path. You beat Duke tomorrow night, and maybe Clemson, Louisville. They're good teams, but they're not unbeatable. I mean, I think Carolina's got the best path they can possibly get to the tournament.
Yep, the table is definitely set for North Carolina. If you can't beat Duke without Cooper Flagg and also Malik Brown, let's not forget him. His defense
at the beginning of the game, right.
Duke is missing 2 horses, so absolutely. And TJ, I would say 100%. You do not need Cooper Flagg against a 16 seed. It's all about that second round game. And, let's say
this is the point. You would love to win the ACC tournament if you could, but it doesn't matter.
Number 1 seed.
No one's going to care a few years from now whether this team won the ACC tournament versus how are they doing in the bigger tournament. And that's the real concern with Flagg. So he's not playing. And then let's see where they end up. Who is the 8-9 game, which we're watching UConn put the finishing touches on Villanova. UConn's probably an 8 or a 7. Could they be in the bracket with Duke? Stay tuned.
Could be. Yeah.
That would be interesting who's in that 8-9 game? Is Kansas going to be in the 8-9 game off the loss to Arizona? By the way, Jason Powers is very happy on the final margin of victory for Arizona. Hey, gambling is legal in New Jersey. Powers went with the -3 on Arizona, and it locked in.
Jason gave early morning advice on Arizona this morning on some other show that I might be involved in. Some guy in Arizona.
Well, Jason, you've recently been to the state of Arizona, so you had to go with the Wildcats. You had to, and you were rewarded.
What was the name of that lunch place we went to?
Oregano's, best Italian food in Phoenix. Yes.
We love it. Hey, a couple of more quick thoughts.
You'll be able to afford a few pizzas after riding with Arizona today. Yeah.
A couple of more quick thoughts. By the way, you get UConn right after St. John's in the Friday night semifinals, so Ari's going to talk more about that. In the SEC, you now have quarterfinal Friday, and a year ago, all 4 of the teams with the double bye lost in Nashville. They lost to teams that were playing better basketball over the previous day or two. Stay tuned on that. What kind of legs does Texas have after double overtime today? The stat, I believe, is Trey Johnson, the freshman phenom. Matt Zemek, he's played 83 of the 90 minutes in the 2 games that they have now won with Vanderbilt and the double overtime win over A&M. Let's not forget Ole Miss. It seems like it was on Tuesday morning. Ole Miss won earlier today on the last-second shot to beat Arkansas. So you got the bubble stuff up there. I think Texas is now in with these 2 wins.
I agree.
I think Arkansas was already in. Matt Zemek, are we going to have 13 SEC teams in this tournament to break the record? It certainly looks like it with Georgia, and I think Oklahoma, depending on the outcome of Oklahoma and Kentucky. Oklahoma's probably done enough. Matt, what do you think?
I think 13 is more likely than not, and 14 SEC teams is very much in play as a possibility, depending on what, your Memphis Tigers, TJ, if they win the AAC, that will improve the odds of 14 SEC teams getting in. But if Memphis loses the AAC tournament, that means a second bid from the AAC, and that shrinks the bubble enough to the extent that either Texas or Oklahoma, which we agree are the last 2 in from the SEC, one of those could get squeezed out by a surprise automatic bid. And that there's the segue now. We haven't yet talked about this, but Boise State getting it done against San Diego State, and that's a really intriguing one because San Diego State was ahead of Boise State on the seed list. And so this becomes a conversation of, does the Mountain West get both of those in now that Boise State won, or is San Diego State on the outside looking in? That's going to be a huge talking point going into Selection Sunday.
By the way, you didn't say it. You got to say it. That game was a what tonight for
Double Rubble Bubble Trouble. Yes. Absolutely.
And Boise State won it head-to-head. And forgive me on our matchups. That's now Boise State playing New Mexico, correct?
Correct. In the first semi, and then it's Colorado State, which Colorado State beat Nevada, and we mentioned this the past few weeks here at College Basketball Coast to Coast. Colorado State, the 2 seed at the Mountain West, been playing great ball over the past month. Colorado State winning the Mountain West, that is a bubble shrinker. So the Bubble Nation is praying for Utah State, the 3rd seed in the bottom half of the bracket, or New Mexico, the 1 seed in the top half of the bracket, to win that tournament. Colorado State is a bubble shrinker to watch at the Mountain West.
And Matt, for me, another team that keeps impressing me, and that's been on a heater the last month, that BYU team. They go beat Iowa State today. They can score. They got shooters and shot makers. I know they don't play a lot of defense, but that's a team to keep an eye on. They're going to be a very dangerous 4, 5, 6 seed in this tournament, in this draw. If they get a good draw, playing maybe against a team that likes to run up and down the court with them, that's a team to keep an eye on, that BYU team.
And I think BYU was a 7 entering this week, might have played its way up to a 6 by beating Iowa State. And if BYU wins the Big 12, certainly a 5 and maybe even a 4 seed, which is nuts given that BYU was a bubble team 2.5, 3 weeks ago. That's pretty crazy.
That's why you keep playing, you keep battling. I know we're going to scoot here in a minute or two, but also on the bubble, Oklahoma. I mean, it's tough to they've got to be in at this point. I don't think North Carolina is in even with the Duke victory. I'm still saying that's only one more quad 1 win. And if you're going head to head, I know Ohio State lost a couple of bad games at the end of the year, but Ohio State's got 6 quad 1 wins. How do you justify putting North Carolina in instead of Ohio State if you're talking about wins matter, WINS, wins, that they matter?
I know what my man Jason Powers would say.
Yeah, the name on the front of the jersey.
TV money.
And by the way, Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director, is the head of the selection committee. So again, as much as we say that they follow their procedures on he's not in the room when they're debating North Carolina's status, it's common sense that when he comes back in the room and he looks up on the wall and they're not in, and as I keep saying, they're looking at him and he's looking at them and he's looking back at them and they're looking back at him and they're looking at the wall. It's human nature.
And if you're CBS and Turner, I know you don't influence the committee, but if you could have Tuesday or Wednesday night at 9:30, North Carolina and Indiana, as a play-in game,
first 4,
you get some ratings on True TV or TBS or whatever station we're broadcasting on these days. That matters a little bit.
Yeah, it could. I'm curious for that for Friday. Again, the SEC teams that are playing on Friday. And then we still haven't seen, what Michigan State and
Michigan and Maryland
and UCLA in the Big Ten tournament. So that's going to be fascinating. My Memphis Tigers haven't played yet. They play early with Wichita State. Again, that's the bid stealer conference to watch. If Memphis doesn't win it, UAB, North Texas, they come into play to maybe steal a bid from one of these bubble teams we're talking about. We'll see.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to get Ari on. So before we let you guys go, just promote your coverage of the MAAC tournament and where people can find you, where people can listen to your fine broadcast.
On this very brand, college basketball coast to coast on the TuneIn live channel, free to hear on TuneIn, college basketball coast to coast, 7:30 Eastern time, Saturday night. The top 2 teams are Quinnipiac and Merrimack out of the Northeast and New England. They're the 1 and 2 seeds. We don't know if they're going to make the title game. That's to be determined Friday night. And we'll call the championship game for the automatic bid our buddy Mike Gill, who's a big radio personality here in Atlantic City on the ESPN afternoon show, ESPN Radio Atlantic City. He will be on the call with Jason and me from famed Boardwalk Hall. You want to tell him that we're staying in a hotel where Miss America is everywhere.
Phyllis George is in the building.
With the memorabilia of Phyllis George's crown, somebody else's dress. That it's all in the lobby because the Miss America pageant was here for 40-plus years in Atlantic City in Boardwalk Hall, where this game's going to be on Saturday night. So we're anxious to do that. So college basketball coast to coast, the TuneIn channel. Find us there.
Quick travel note. Got to give a shout out to the Swarthmore girls lacrosse team who was on the airplane with us
from Tampa.
They were on spring break playing a little lacrosse down in the state of Florida. They were doing homework on the plane coming back. So shout out to the girls from Swarthmore lacrosse.
Philadelphia D3 school. Nothing but the best for us. We're flying with the Philadelphia D3 school lacrosse team to get to Philadelphia and then drive to Atlantic City. This is what we do.
And a shout out to Robert Morris, too, from Pittsburgh, winning the Horizon the other night. Keep an eye on Alvaro Forgaris.
Yep, the big left-handed 6'9" Spaniard that plays for Robert Morris. They've got guards. They're going to
Bobby Moe, Matt Zemek, Bobby Moe in the building.
Bobby Moe's going to be dangerous, maybe as a 14 seed or a 15 seed. So I know you're going to get Ari back on. You guys keep knocking them dead here on all the college basketball coast-to-coast platforms. And we will all regroup for tomorrow and Saturday. My Lord, it's already tomorrow in the Eastern time zone. It's already Friday, which means it's 2 days from Selection Sunday.
I would tell you to stay out of trouble in Atlantic City, but I don't know if you guys can pull that off.
Brisk, walking down the streets.
It is a little cool. That is true. But listen, we'll have fun.
Anyway.
You guys keep having fun with this. And hang in there. Live coverage Saturday night of the MAC championship game. Live Selection Sunday show on these platforms. After all of the bids go out and the brackets are up, we'll be talking about it Sunday night. You guys keep knocking them dead. Matt and Ari, you guys be well.
All right. Saturday, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, correct?
Correct. To be determined who the championship game is, the automatic bid. And the winner might be in Dayton. The winner might be a 16 seed in the first four. Stay tuned.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
We'll see.
All right. We are back with Ari Russell. And so Villanova and UConn, Ari, we wanted to get you on to review the day session Big East quarterfinals. And then we wanted to get TJ and Jason for the national perspective, and then bring you on for that Villanova UConn late night game at the Garden. What's your overall observation from what you saw between the Wildcats and the Huskies?
Well, it was a close game until the last 8-9 minutes of that game, and it just similar to what was one of the regular season games too, where it was close, tight, and then UConn pulls away. Villanova, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with Kyle Neptune. I mean, if he's not let go tomorrow or soon, his seat is on fire, because this is obviously replacing the legend. You don't want to be the guy to be the guy to replace the legend. You want to be the guy that replaces the guy that replaces the legend, right? Obviously Neptune was, one of his top assistants, Jay Wright's top assistants, and it's just not working out. They have a pretty good roster. You would think, Wooga Poplar is one of their best players, with Eric Dixon, who's been there forever and has suffered through injuries, but has really improved his game and extended his game out. And it just wasn't working out. Poplar, obviously coming from Miami, has a Final Four, pedigree from there, and he was a key player on that team. And it just not enough guys. And UConn is not the same UConn team as we've seen the previous 2 years in a row. They are probably going to struggle. I don't expect them to be anywhere close to the Final Four this year, finals at all. You never know, but they just don't have the guard play. Today, the guard play really did step up in the second half in particular. But it's just not at the level that it had been in the previous 2 years, where you had guys that just were really consistent, and the way that they would move the ball and find the open man, and the way that the offense would be, how they would execute the offense was just very high level. It's not quite. It has glitches in it this year. Caravan has played very well the last several games. He's kind of come back into form. So that they still are Bobby Hurley. I mean, they're still a Danny Hurley coach team. So you never know. But I'm not fully sold on UConn making the three-peat here. I don't think he has the guns this year to do it, but very impressive win, especially pulling away late and pretty much dominating Villanova down the stretch and snuffing them out, especially on the defensive end. Just really relentless again on the perimeter. That's kind of what Danny Hurley does, is really snuff out your perimeter shots and making it very difficult to run your offense. So that's something that I noticed in that second half, that they kind of were UConn of what we've seen defensively. Just offensively, they're just not quite as good as they had been. Of course, they lost a lot of guys. Not having a 7'2", 7'3" Donovan Clingan, that was a big body is a pretty big loss. Obviously, everyone else is in the pros, Spencer and what have you. So it's just not what it was. I don't expect them even to win the Big East. In fact, today was since the first time since 2004 that they had beaten Villanova in the Big East tournament. They just since 2004, which is they just showed that up on the graphic on Fox. So that was actually a pretty interesting concept there, because you would think, last 2 years, UConn has been so dominant down the stretch. But Villanova's been great in Madison Square Garden over the years, just not with Kyle Neptune. So, Villanova's got a lot of questions that need to be answered as far as where their program and the direction is, and whether Kyle Neptune is going to be the guy, or is the next person up going to be. And that'll be interesting, because that's a hell of a program with a hell of a history, 3 national titles, several Final Fours, obviously, well sought out job if Kyle Neptune is let go. I don't know if he will. I don't have any inside information on that. But I would expect that the fan base is not happy because they're not making the NCAA tournament at all after tonight. I think they'd have to pretty much win the Big East to do it, or at least get to the finals to even get within the bubble. But now they're completely outside of it.
All right, we're going to preview the Creighton UConn Big East semifinal in a bit, but let me first ask you, when I talk to Villanova fans on Twitter, social media, some of them say, well, that guy might be a good coach, but is he the right fit for us, for, Catholic Northeastern institution, particular about its values? What do you say? Where do you weigh in on that cultural element? Because, for instance, Buzz Williams, coaching at Texas A&M might not seem like a cultural fit, but wait, he coached at Marquette. That is a Catholic university. So culture seems pretty malleable here in terms of what is deemed an acceptable fit for Villanova. How do you get at that question?
Yeah, this isn't the 1950s, man. So, let's throw all that out. The culture, culture is, we know what the culture is? Winning. That's the culture. Win. You win, they don't care. Jay Wright was dressed in, he was dressed like Wall Street guy, very smooth, very, GQ. He didn't seem like your typical Catholic school coach, right? So I think, it's 2025, I don't think it's the 1950s anymore, so there might be some old heads that care about that, but they're not the ones that are, really all they care about is getting the winning, to get the winning done, and we'll work from there. And if you're not winning, then you ain't gonna fit the culture, period. So, it is a job that I think that they obviously have certain values. It is a Catholic school that they internally want to have. They're not going to just get some Wheeler and like Will Wade will never be the coach of Villanova, right?
Yeah.
Right. Or like
Chris Beard
Chris Beard or Billy Gillespie, whatever happened to him? Is he? Then he? So
he's at Tarleton, I believe. He's at Tarleton State, I believe.
Or he's at Tarleton State. Perfect. That's a perfect place for him. So it but not Villanova. So some guys, that they're not going to fit. They're not. There's going to be a certain demeanor, certain kind of pedigree that is not going to work for them. Like a Jim Herrick would never have been able to coach at Villanova.
Yeah.
So but with NIL now, there's kind of curves, and with NIL as well, you have to keep in mind. They're doing the revenue sharing now. So teams like, for instance, going back to Seton Hall. Seton Hall wasn't able to compete this past year because they just didn't have the NIL money. But they're doing revenue sharing now to kind of lift up some of the other programs that might not have the NIL budget. So, Shaheen Holloway didn't forget how to coach. He just didn't have the guys. Plus, they had a lot of injuries. So he's safe at Seton Hall, even though he had a bad year. But he lost Kadari Richmond, who's now playing for St. John's and is a first-team All-Big East player. And, this team is probably going to be a 2 seed. So that's a huge loss of a guy to get because he just couldn't pay him. And guys like Rick Pitino know that. So, and he mentioned it. So, Villanova, I think, is pretty solid as far as NIL is concerned. Obviously, they were able to keep Dixon around. They brought in Awuga Poplar, who, again, a pretty decorated player from Miami with Final Four pedigree. So it's not like they don't have the budget at Villanova to do that. It's not like Seton Hall, but I think they should be helped next year. But the Neptune situation is something that's probably pretty tumultuous, and I would think that the fan base is not going to be that much patient with him any longer. Maybe he gets one more year to work it out, and they better as heck make the NCAA tournament next year, because otherwise, I just don't see. Jay Wright raised the profile of this program. Obviously, Massimino won a title, but they didn't have like the full on expectations to win it every year. That was kind of like a shocking year anyway. But Jay Wright really lifted that program into the stratosphere, almost making it a blue blood basically. And so now you're going to be a victim of those expectations. And Kyle Neptune hasn't reached them since he took over from when Jay Wright retired.
Yep. So at Villanova, they can get the groceries. It's about finding the right chef, someone who can cook.
Right.
That's the issue at Villanova. All right. So enough about the Wildcats. They're done. You can stick a fork in them. And our eyes turn to the second semifinal Friday night, Creighton and UConn. And Creighton, we didn't really talk about their quarterfinal. But Creighton just asleep at the wheel most of the night, and then like me in 8th grade, doing homework in my mom's car in the parking lot right before school begins. That was Creighton tonight. The 11-0 run late to take DePaul into overtime and eventually win in double overtime. So, Ari, we can do the math here. Creighton was looking ahead to UConn, did not really lock in against DePaul, but managed to get through. And so now you have that tasty 2 versus 3 late night semifinal. It's probably going to be a pro UConn crowd, and I think most people in New York are expecting St. John's and UConn to be there on Saturday night. Certainly, most of the ticket buyers in MSG are expecting that. But Creighton's been a thorn in UConn's side, and the fact that Creighton kind of looked past DePaul, probably saving up a little mental energy. This is not an easy one to call, I would think.
No, it's not at all. Especially how UConn closed the game today. Just really turn the lights off. It is something that Kalkbrenner though is really the game changer. I mean, I think he's 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East. The guy is just, when he's on the court, it just changes the whole dynamic of both ends, because he's good offensively as well, but defensively, he just is so dominant and has such an impact on the defensive end that it's very difficult. And again, UConn has had problems with him this year, right? Previous years, they had Klingon and before that Sinago that were able to kind of neutralize him. They don't have that player at this point in the post, the 5, that could really handle a player like him. On the offensive end, he possesses a lot of problems because he is so tall. He does those high screens. He also is a really good passer. Underrated passer. People don't talk about his passing abilities, but they do kind of have him up high to set those screens. He's pretty darn mobile as well, so he's a challenge to guard offensively as well. So, that he's pretty much going to be the best player on the court. So anytime he's out there, it's a problem. I remember watching the Creighton St. John's game, right? And Creighton had a lead, it wasn't a big lead. It was like 7 points or something in the second half. Pretty well, I think it was like after the 8-minute timeout. It was like 6 or 7 point lead, right? But they take him out for like a 2-minute stretch, and that lead disappears, and then St. John's takes the lead, and then they hold it on from there. That's how much of an impact this guy has on the court. I mean, he's going to have to play 40 minutes or close to 35, 36 minutes. If he gets in foul trouble, that's a big deal. And I would expect that Hurley's going to do his best to try to get the whistle on Kalkbrenner, because he is going to be the most impact type player on the late game for the Big East tournament. So that's going to be an interesting matchup again. The ticket sellers at this point won't really be too pissed off as long as St. John's wins the first game, because they're not going to want the Marquette Creighton final. They're going to want the St. John's and or UConn. St. John's UConn is going to be obviously the best ticket price, because they'll be able to pump the prices up for that final. But St. John's in there would be much easier to get rid of it, because then a lot of people, you're going to get all the sidewalk alums coming out and saying, oh, yeah, I got to see St. John's. And all of a sudden they're yelling and they're experts of St. John's, even though they just started watching it last week. But, hey, that's fans and that's casuals. And we welcome the casuals because it's all good. I love it. I'm not one of the purists that hate casual fans. I'm like, cool. The more the merrier. More people maybe can watch our show, possibly. Learn something, and don't take anything that I say as any type of factual things, especially if you're picking games, because I will lose you money.
Well, in terms of some other detailed questions about this game and its plot points, two UConn players I'm interested in. One is Terrace Reed. He has really come on strong.
Sorry, but he's the sixth man of the year. Yes, good pickup.
Yeah, so I'm interested in how he fits into this matchup, given his torrid play of late, really being a force heading into March. And then on the other side of the coin for UConn, someone who's not really been nearly as productive as Dan Hurley had hoped, Aiden Mahaney. He was so good at St. Mary's in the Randy Bennett system. And you think, oh, okay, he goes to UConn and he's just going to be that structured floor general, point guard leader who's just going to give some, cohesion to all this dazzling athletic talent that UConn can put on the floor. That was certainly the vision I had. That's probably the vision Dan Hurley had. And it just hasn't happened. And it seems to me that just Aiden Mahaney, he has a high basketball IQ, but he's not as quick as he needs to be the ultimate factor on the floor. But so how do you sense those two players, Reed on a positive level, Mahaney on a not so positive level, factoring into this matchup for UConn in terms of how Hurley's going to work his rotations and both accentuate his strengths with Reed, but also try to hide or minimize his weaknesses with Mahaney?
Well, that's interesting that you bring that up, because Mahaney is actually one of the key players today that actually was one of the reasons why UConn started to pull away, because he was making a lot of plays, really look good down the stretch here. In fact, he had this one beautiful layup where it just, he kind of stretched his body out, was able to kind of get it over the trees. And I was like, wow, that's kind of what they've been hoping for Mahaney this whole year. So, maybe that's the difference in this, and that's a good that you bring it up. That if he's able to play like he did today, he's going to be an interesting factor moving forward, possibly for UConn. Again, making them dangerous again. But you're right, though. There is kind of that quickness that he doesn't necessarily possess full time, but he did play with a lot of kind of savvy, and sometimes it's that IQ that can get you past that maybe athleticism factor that's there, especially when you play late in March or trying to play late into March. Those types of things can be the factor, can be the difference in being able to advance. So yeah, as far as like a Creighton game tomorrow, it'll be interesting to see how Mahaney, continues what he was able to do, especially in the second half today against Villanova. If he's able to continue that moving forward, it does present an interesting factor for UConn. As far as Reed is concerned, again, like you said, he has been on an absolute tear. Just been phenomenal. Again, he's the sixth man of the year, but it's been pretty much the last 10 games or so that I think that's what earned him it, because he's just been absolutely a monster on both ends. And just kind of your classic old school Big East type player, but just tremendous athleticism and just all over the place, relentless type player. And, so again, if these pieces really start to come together again, that's where you start to get scary. That's where things start to get scary. But, again, Creighton, that's going to be the interesting matchup. If Mahaney and Reed, continue, if Mahaney has, a back-to-back game here where he's looking good again, and UConn makes it to the finals and they're playing St. John's and then he has another good game and they end up winning the Big East tournament, I'm going to take back what I said before, because, but again, those two players are huge X factors and are going to be key to whether we see UConn kind of have that March explosion like we've known for the past 2 years.
All right, winding down the show, a couple more items for you, Ari, here on College Basketball Coast to Coast. And first is just anything we haven't mentioned yet. You've spent the day at Madison Square Garden. You have some videos posted on the College Basketball Coast to Coast YouTube channel. Give you a chance to promote that and just like any other things that like seen, heard, felt behind the scenes, notes, quotes, anecdotes, just things that really interested you, that caught your eye, that you think, are really noteworthy and that people around the nation might not have noticed at the Big East quarterfinals, but things that you were able to pick up on with your reportage today at MSG.
I mean, there's this edge that it's not something that is unreported, but you see it when you see it in person. There's an edge that St. John's has that many teams just don't have. They just it is a relentlessness, their focus on defense and their just ability to somehow always win the 50-50 battle. It is unbelievable how, and Marquette was talking about that. He said, like, playing against St. John's, 50-50 balls, they get them, So it's not even 50-50. It's basically 100% St. John's. That is just something that keep an eye on, because those are the difference makers, especially moving forward, because you're not going to out hustle them. You're not going to outwork them. They just all have super high motors, a very high basketball IQ team, very unselfish. No one really cares about being the star. They'll make the extra pass if they need it. They're also, even though they don't shoot particularly well percentage-wise, they're still not afraid to take the shots, even after missing a whole bunch of them, especially from three. So it's sometimes you look at it because why? Because they're so relentless, they're going to get an offensive rebound here or there. So they're going to extend possessions, but they'll find the open man, they'll find an open seam, and just getting the hands on loose balls and just stripping the ball and getting into transition. They do a lot of the little things on defense in particular and on offense that many teams don't do. And yes, they're not the best shooting team in the world offensively. Sometimes will struggle, even missing layups, especially in the first half today. But it doesn't matter. Their defense is so elite. It is so intense. Again, I'm not revealing any type of government secrets here. There's no top secret file on it. It's all been seen. But I just haven't seen a team that's been able to figure it out yet. And you've got some really good, innovative coaches in the Big East, and none of them had been able to figure out what is this team's weakness as far as attacking them on the deep. When you're on offense, how does our offense attack them? Usually they just haven't been able to figure it out yet. So that's what it is. That'll be interesting if there's a coach that's able to figure out some scheme to try to figure out a weakness in St. John's defense. I haven't seen it. I just haven't so far. Not saying that there isn't one, but there hasn't been anyone to be able to show that to me, especially in Big East play. And you've got some phenomenal coaches in that conference. I mean, Shaka Smart is a brilliant coach. They're 0-2 against them. Obviously we've got, Danny Hurley is 0-2 against this St. John's team this year. He's got back-to-back titles. Thad Matta, another guy that's a hell of a coach, got a Final Four the appearance when he was at Ohio State, has won everywhere that he's ever been. Wasn't able to figure it out today, or during the regular season either, because they lost both of those games. So, and St. John's tied the conference win total. So in the history of the conference, they have tied for the most wins. Outside of that, Marquette, I'm impressed. They're a team that I look out for in the tournament. Of course, don't take anything that I say with anything because they'll probably get knocked down the first round to jinx them probably. But the only reason why I say that is because of guard play. They're just loaded with guards, and with senior guards. These guys have been there forever. And for me, what pisses me off about all of this stuff, a guy like Cam Jones, right? 6'5" guy that's really kind of a combo guard, play the point, play the two, right? 6'5" guy is really good in college, right? He's not even in the draft boards in the first round. What are you doing? Like, if I'm a GM and I'm looking at a guy, I'm like, Cam Jones can play in the NBA. I mean, there's no question. And he could play tomorrow in the NBA, right? But no, they want to get a guy that's
19
years old,
exactly,
right?
Being 22 is a knock against you. It's crazy.
Which is stupid because you wonder why the NBA is having problems, and it goes back to that. And guys like Cam Jones is not on that list, and it's like there's no way in hell that this guy should not be in. I'm not saying necessarily a lottery pick, but he's a first round pick. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he's first round.
If I'm he's a guy that's going to end up on the Heat. Because they're going to get or like the Spurs.
Or the Spurs.
Yeah, they'll end up in the Heat and the Spurs and be fine, and end up winning a title in 3 years and being like a key guy off the bench, that comes like the sixth man. He'll end up being the sixth man on the Spurs when they win the championship with when Wembanyama hopefully comes back. So anyway, but, you look at guys like that. Mitchell is another guy. He's a little smaller, but he's a guy very impressed with his locker room appearance today, just talking to the reporters and how he speaks and how he just like his personality just shined to me. Like, you talk to some of these guys and some of them are shy and what have you, and he's not, and he's just breaking it down and talking about his teammates and just answering questions thoroughly and without any type of cliche answer. Everything is very, I'm like, wow, that guy's going to be a coach. Stephen Mitchell is going to be a coach one day. Mark my words. I'll put money on that one. Because you could tell. So Marquette is a team that might not be able to beat St. John's, but they're a team that can. I could see them making the Sweet 16, Elite 8 possibly. Because of the guard play, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
All right, Ari. So we've talked a lot about the Big East tournament and your coverage there, and we invite you to all of you listening or watching here on College Basketball Coast to Coast to go to YouTube, go to the College Basketball Coast to Coast YouTube channel, and find Ari's videos, his interviews with various players from Big East quarterfinal Thursday. But Ari, before we close things down, by the way, Kentucky is leading Oklahoma late. Looks like Kentucky's going to advance in the SEC tournament. It's not quite final, but it's looking probable that Kentucky's going to advance. So Oklahoma's going to have that long wait, maybe go to Dayton. So Ari, just as we close the show, any other national thoughts? Bubble picture, big movers, big losers, the stories that grabbed your eye, the things that you're going to be looking at, not Big East, but anything else
right
across the country from now until Selection Sunday afternoon.
Well, I mean, yeah, all eyes are going to be on Texas. All eyes on Oklahoma. I think those two teams in the SEC are really the biggest bubble teams that we're looking at, I think, at this point, because they're the 13th and 14th team, I think, that are part of it, if I'm not mistaken. Ohio State, again, that's another team that we're looking at. They do have a lot of quad one wins, as TJ had mentioned earlier. So that's in their favor. Indiana, boy, this bubble is weak, man. But it's, I thought, the Mountain West shot themselves in the both feet, I think, so far, because they needed to have the top, they needed to have Boise and San Diego State, all of them, and New Mexico and Utah State. That needed to be the final four, but that's not what's going to happen. So, Colorado State can be the disruptor. As you said, they could be a bid stealer, and they've been playing well enough to do that, possibly. So so Texas and Oklahoma are keeping an eye praying against that particular one. But we're starting to see the bubble really start to shrink now, which is, I guess, a good thing. And I don't think there's going to be too many things. Oh, this team should have made it and that team shouldn't have made it. There's really not that much going on at this point. It's really going to be between two bubble teams where you can flip a coin, and thank God Drake had made it because that was I was worried about that one because trust me, like so many of these teams just do not belong in Drake's presence, in my opinion. So, but I think Texas is pretty good to go at this point. The win today against Texas A&M, Oklahoma. If it holds, that's going to be one where they're going to be sweating a little bit, even though they had a hell of a start to the season, and with a lot of quality wins. They really needed this one today, I think, in order for them to really solidify their chances. But yet they still can get in. It's crazy. I just would hope that Xavier would get in ahead of Oklahoma, in my opinion. And North Carolina.
Do you think Xavier should be in ahead of Oklahoma?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point, yeah, I do.
Where do you think Indiana fits? Because Indiana is a strong candidate for Dayton. How would you put Indiana up against Xavier, Oklahoma, and North Carolina?
I would say Indiana is ahead of North Carolina, is behind Xavier, and ahead of Oklahoma. So, yeah.
So two out of three ain't bad, and it could be the difference between getting in and getting out.
Yeah, but we don't know. But it is interesting. The bubble is definitely narrowed more now because, again, there's not enough good teams out there. There really isn't. I mean, remember we were talking 2 weeks ago, Nebraska. Well, they didn't even make the Big Ten tournament, so they were way out of it.
Yeah.
But Ohio State's there too. But again, I think they have too many wins. But I don't even think they're that good either.
Yeah, well, Ohio State made it pretty easy for the committee. They're definitely out. Boise State, after the win over San Diego State, where do you rate Boise State? Is Boise State a last four in? Do you think Boise State needs to beat New Mexico in the Mountain West semi to nail down the bid? Where do you stand on that one?
Yeah, I think they probably do at this point. They're not going to give the Mountain West 3 or 4 teams. I think once I thought they deserved 4, but there was a lot of slip up in the last week or so that didn't really play out the way it should have for them.
Let me ask you this. If Colorado State wins the Mountain West tournament, then does that pop Boise State's bubble? Where does San Diego State fit into the picture?
Oof. Yeah, I think it pops Boise's bubble. I think San Diego State would get ahead of Boise, even though they're neck and neck. But I think it's Colorado State not only knocks out Boise, but knocks out probably either Oklahoma, Indiana, UNC, Xavier. Name your next bubble team. Texas. Texas is probably pretty good right now.
All right, final question. First four, because the first four is the back end of the bubble. It's where you have the teams nearest to the cut line. Which conference gets 2 teams into the first four? Because I think you can make a credible case that the Mountain West could get 2 teams in to Dayton, and you could have the SEC with 2 teams in Dayton. If you had to pick one of those 2 conferences getting multiple teams in Dayton for the first 4, would it be the Mountain West with a potential San Diego State, Boise State combo in separate games? Would it be the SEC? And here's answer C. Are the Mountain West and SEC basically going to have a 4-team invitational in Dayton? Or do you think it's going to be maybe Xavier or Indiana in one of those games? Just give me what you think the first 4 is most likely to look like.
I think that what they'll end up doing, if they're doing that, they're going to probably put 2 Mountain West teams in the first 4. along with an SEC team, and name your other, conference bubble team, Xavier, or,
Xavier, Indiana for the last spot, maybe.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't see UNC, if they make the tournament, being in that last spot. Though Jason did bring up a good point about UNC Indiana being a first 4 game, and that would be a pretty fun draw. But that'll be interesting, actually, if that happens.
It sure would be. All right, Ari Russell, we know it's been a late night for you following the Big East tournament. You've been at Madison Square Garden. Hey, everybody, follow Ari's coverage on the college basketball Coast to Coast YouTube page. He interviewed several players, talked to the St. John's players in particular after their win. Like, that's the hot story in the Big East. But follow Ari's coverage throughout the weekend at Madison Square Garden here at College Basketball Coast to Coast. Ari, thank you for staying up late with us. Thank you for your reportage. Thank you for your insight. Always appreciate it. And of course, we will be talking to you over the weekend, coming up through Selection Sunday. And then obviously you're going to be joining us at some point for our bracket breakdown. So looking forward to what you are going to deliver here at College Basketball Coast to Coast. Thank you so much, Ari.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, and we'll be doing more live shows over the weekend, and of course, follow TJ Rives and Jason Powers, their coverage of the MAAC Championship. You can't just call it the MAC; it's the MAAC. 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. The College Basketball Coast to Coast tune-in radio channel. That's Saturday night, 7:30 Eastern, for the MAAC Championship with TJ and Jason. All right, for Ari Russell and everyone else here at College Basketball Coast to Coast, thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on the road to Selection Sunday.